Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Dr. Joey interviews Christian business professionals just like you to discover their secrets for working faith positive in a negative world. Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett.
Faith Positive Nation, I have two wonderful guests today that you're absolutely going to love because they do such meaningful work in their local community. We all, if we live long enough, face that time in our lives where we can no longer physically care for ourselves. And yet none of us cherish or even want to entertain the idea of going to a nursing home or something like that. And so we all want to stay in our homes. How do we do that? There's this incredible company that has franchised itself across the U.S. called Home Instead. And today I have the pleasure of sharing with you the witness and how faith at work works for Van Lankford. Van is the franchise owner of Home Instead in Mayberry, which is known on the map as Mount Airy, North Carolina, but to the rest of us, it's known as Mayberry. And the Snappy Diner's there, and Thelma Lou lives in the area, and so it's just an idyllic place. In fact, it's been rated one of the top retirement places in the entire U.S. So Faith Positive Nation, join me in saying welcome to Van Lankford. Van, thanks for the gift of your time today.
Thank you, Dr. Joey. Enjoyed being here.
Yeah, thanks so much. And evidently your COO is a little bashful there.
Yeah, he took a place on my lap here, but this is Snickers. He wanted to be involved with it, but he's probably going to just be on the lap for a little while.
Yeah, he's the silent partner in the Home Instead franchise in Mount Airy, right?
I'll tell you, actually, Snickers helps with our marketing because we, as we go to health fairs. We also go to the hospital occasionally and do activities with some of the long-term residents there.
Yeah.
And one of our caregivers made Snickers a little Home Instead T-shirt that he wears, and he goes and we've had him at some of the long-term care facilities, and he gets the patients, and so they, there's something about senior adults and animals they really bond. So Snickers has been a great addition to our staff, and he works for cheap. So
he works for food.
He works for treats. So what better could you ask?
Well, I've had a few gigs where I worked for treats too. So. I love it. So Snickers is a silent partner. Well, I absolutely love it. Well, I got to tell you, man, this is the first time I've interviewed couples before, but it's the first time one of them's been a furry companion. But I absolutely, by the way, not just senior adults love animals. I love them too. And
we do. Our family does too. And so Snickers, he's definitely part of our family. There's no question.
Oh yeah. Well, my wife and I find ourselves without grandchildren, with grown daughters, but without grandchildren. So we have grand dogs. We actually have 4 grand dogs, and so we like for them to come and visit.
Yeah.
So it's good.
I've got 1 grand dog. So
there you go. You do understand. Home Instead is a wonderful company. I went on the internet, homeinstead.com, I think is the website. And it just does a marvelous ministry. And part of the story of how that company was formed is also your story, because you found yourself as an only child needing to care for an aging parent.
Right. Yeah.
Tell us about how you got involved.
Well, Joy, my mother passed away. As a matter of fact, it will be 10 years ago tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
On March 25th, 2007, she passed away. And so my dad at that time was her primary caregiver. They both retired, and they both had some health issues. But my dad was her primary caregiver. So I knew that when my mom passed away, that he needed to do a lot of things on his own. He knew how to cook and how to, do some various things, do laundry and things so I really was not that concerned about his well-being. As you mentioned, being an only child,
right.
I was at that time living an hour away, and I was busy with my children, who at that time were listed. They would have been, my daughter would have been 15 and my son would have been 11.
Wow.
They were involved in their activities. My son, if you could throw it or bounce it or hit it, he wanted to be involved with it. He was very much involved with sports, and
gotcha.
He's right now as a college student seeking a career in sports business.
Oh, wonderful.
And then my daughter, who was the arts person in our family, she was in music and dance, and so we wanted to be involved with their life.
Yeah.
But I was an hour away, an only child, and so. Then after my mom passed away, about 6 to 8 months later, my dad started having some health concerns.
Oh, wow.
And so I knew, but he never would really come out and say what was wrong. And we find this a lot with our people that call us for help, children who call us. Senior adults, as we all can be, are very independent. And my dad was wanting to be very independent too.
Yeah.
And so
it's part of how we live to get old is we're independent, right?
And so even though when my mom died, even though I talked to my parents, through the week, I vowed that every night I would call my father and check on him. And so our conversation lasts maybe 10 minutes. How was your day?
Sure.
What's going on?
Yeah.
And from his perspective, what he was telling me, everything was fine.
Yeah.
And
he
then,
told you what he wanted you to know.
Exactly. And then family members started calling me, like his brother and my aunt and things like that. And they would ask me, well, how's your dad doing? I said, well, he tells me he's doing fine. Well, let me tell you kind of what's going on here.
What's really happening. Yeah.
And it turned out my dad was calling them to, go to Bojangles and bring me a biscuit, and go to Burger King and bring me so obviously my dad was not getting the meals he wanted. And I really, as I look back on it, when I would go up, I try to go up once a month and do some things for my dad, do errands and stuff. His grocery list consisted of Little Debbie cakes and cheese crackers, and I should have known then something was wrong.
Well, I don't know, man. A fella could do worse than cheese crackers and Little Debbie cakes. I get your point, though.
Yeah, but I would go to the pantry, his pantry, and he would be stocked with all kinds of food, and the refrigerator would have food, and so I just assumed that everything was okay. But then when I got that call, it really told me there wasn't something okay. And so one day I went up and me and my dad had a hard conversation about his needs and things that were going on. And I learned through that conversation that even his own personal hygiene was suffering, that he was because of some conditions that he had, he was afraid to get in the shower
right.
himself,
and that's hard to admit.
Exactly. And so back then I thought, well, if you can't stay at home independently, you've got to go to a facility somewhere. And so trying to be the good son, I set up appointments at a couple of facilities there in his hometown where he lived, because I knew that's where he wanted to stay. And it was funny because at the end of each tour, he would look at me and he said, I'd say, well, what do you think, Dad? He said, well, that was real nice. We could go back home. And so,
that was really nice. Thanks for bringing me here.
And so I remember one day going up to visit my dad. I think it was on a Wednesday. And, I'd taken some time off from work and just at my wit's end, not knowing what to do. And I went down to the senior center, which in our community was really only just a few miles from my dad's house. And I said, here's what I need. I need somebody to come in and, fix some meals and do some housework and do this. And they said, you need to go to Homestead Senior Care. And so I made a beeline to the Homestead office there in my hometown of North Wilkesboro, North Carolina. And to make a long story short, Homestead came in and took care of my dad's needs. And it wasn't I think it was maybe 2 or 3 days a week, just for a few hours a day. But yet it allowed him to be able to stay in the place where he wanted to stay, which is his home. Right. And not have to go to the facility. And so it proved to be a very economical way to do that and a very practical way to do that. And so that's how I first came to know about this whole idea of home care through my own personal experience. And so as I talk with families, and usually it's very rarely the senior that will call. Occasionally the senior will call, but 98% of the time it's a daughter or a son, usually the daughter, but a daughter or a son who will call.
Or a daughter-in-law oftentimes will call.
Daughter-in-law, exactly. And say, we have need. And so as I tell them about what our services are, I also try to share some of my own story. And say, I was on the other end of the phone one time. I know exactly where you're coming from. And, and I hear some of the pain in their voice, some of those pain points and some of the guilt and some of the worry. And but yet that tug between, the same tug I had between love for my dad and but yet love for my children, that I wanted to be involved in their life too. So
I think we're referred to as the sandwich generation because we're slammed in between raising these children and having aging parents. Right?
And there comes a point where I mean, even though you feel obligated to be your parent's caregiver, you still be their child. And that I know that my dad, he asked me to do some things which I really didn't mind, but I think even he didn't want to ask me to do, which maybe someone else, he felt more comfortable asking to do. So I think for parents and children, there is that, there's that boundary that you want to respect, and again, from the child's point of view, I want to be my dad's son, and I find ladies say I want to be my parents' daughter. So, but there's always that guilt and that fear and that anxiety of I know my parents need help. Sometimes I can't always be there to help them.
Yeah, exactly. So there's some guilt and regret about that. Well, it sounds like empathy really drives your business then, and an understanding of the situation, as well as I'm picking up on a whole lot of God's grace. And so really you are that's got to be one of your core values in terms of the way you do business, Van.
Well, I want to think it is. I have as I've had a relationship for years. I was a pastor before doing this, and 23 years. And so I really try to approach my business as my ministry. My work is my worship. And so I come at it from that standpoint because, again, there are people that are hurting, and there are people that need a solution. Now, it is a ministry. It's also a business because we hire people and have to pay people and have to charge people.
That's right.
But the underlying thing is our ministry. One of the things that in our home instead values, the very first value, and this is, again, you're talking about, I'm going to get our pride says we're the largest in-home care company in the United States, which we are, and I'm proud.
Wow, that's amazing.
But our number one value is to honor God in all we do, and that's those values hang in our office, and so we do feel like that what we do our business is to honor God and to help families in their time of need, because we find that most of the time people call us when they're in a crisis. They don't call you to say what if, they call you to say I need you now, and usually it's past time, isn't it? Yeah, and occasionally somebody will, I've had the experience where someone's called and said, I'm gathering information now for down the road. And 6-8 months later, they will call us back. And say, now it's time. And so, but majority of the time, mom or dad is in the hospital in a rehab facility. They need to come home. Hey, I live in Florida or Texas or an hour down the road, and I've got a full-time job. I need help, and so that's how a lot of our relationships are forged through those times of crisis. And as a pastor, you enter a lot of those crisis situations as well, and so I was kind of accustomed to that. And it's been an asset to me to be able to mix, as you said, grace and hopefully the presence of God. Bring the presence of God in those anxious situations.
So part of the attraction for you in terms of what franchise is God leading me to purchase here? Was it Home Instead, the largest in-home care provider in the country, has as its number one core value to honor God in all we do?
Yeah, and I think if you and I've had the occasion to actually meet and talk with the founders of our company, Paul and Lord Hogan. They are very very devout Christians, and so they actually if you go on our website and read their story is a lot like mine, except they were trying to find care for their grandmother, Paul's grandmother. And it was out of that need for care that Home Instead, the largest home care company in the United States, came about, because one person needed care for their grandma like I needed care for my dad. So it's that need-based business model that's helped us be where we are today.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What are some of the challenges that you as a franchise owner face? Anybody in business today will tell you their challenges. So what are some of yours?
Well, Dr. Joey, ours is a unique business. Of course, besides the usual business challenges of cash flow and being able to make payroll on time and things like that.
Yeah, that's cause for celebration, right? When you made payroll this week.
You got enough money in the bank to pay all your caregivers.
That's right.
That's for sure.
Yeah, and they're hoping to go to the grocery store.
Right, exactly. And so that is another aspect, that not only are you providing care for individuals, you're providing jobs for other individuals who really, our caregivers are wonderful people. Majority of them are ladies. We have a few gentlemen, but they have such a great heart for what they do. Many of them have come to this path because they have cared for a family member or loved one, and they have just a great heart for caring for people, and they want to make caring for people their career. And so I think that's wonderful. But one of the other challenges that really we are facing now is I found it interesting that I started Home Instead in Mount Airy in 2011. Okay. And that was the first year the baby boomers turned 65. So projections are in the next 20 years, the senior population is just going to explode.
Wow.
And so, and even now we're finding that one of our challenges is kind of a supply and demand, that the demand sometimes is more than the supply. And I say that in that we always look for compassionate caregivers, folks who, that this is more than just a job. It's more than just picking up a paycheck, a couple times a month, but they truly care for folks. And so one of our challenges is finding good caregivers, qualified people that, again, have this passion and have this desire to truly help, and, again, not just pick up a paycheck. So that's one of our challenges, and I think that's not just in Mount Airy, but that's as I talk to other franchise owners and our home office, which is in Omaha, as they communicate with us, that's kind of nationwide, that we're all looking for good, compassionate people, because you want to have someone there with the right attitude. And the right.
Yeah, because they're representing your company, and of course your business is on the line. But what I hear you saying, really, Van, is you're looking for people not just who have a degree or a certificate in some area of home health care, but their divine design is one that suits them for this work. How do you discover those people? Because that's an intangible.
I think again, it comes as someone comes to our office, and of course we take applications online as well. But usually we try to follow up with most of the folks that apply either online or in our office. We'll do a quick interview, and what you look for again is that heart. Someone who's done it before.
So previous experience is helpful. What kinds of questions do you ask to discover their heart?
Well, we go and we ask them first, have you ever had experience doing this before? I mean, it could be with a family member, a loved one. I know a caregiver that I hired within the first few weeks that I was here, who's still with me. I'll always remember her. And she's a lady who's just has a wonderful heart. And I remember our interview, my initial interview with her. Back then, being the only starting the business, I did everything. I interviewed the caregivers. I did scheduling. I did I did marketing. I did everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, now you said earlier Snickers helped you with the marketing.
Right, exactly.
So,
he's my account executive now. But early on, I remember in our interview, she told me, she said that she cared for her mother. And she said, I will bring that same care to my clients. I'll care for them like I would care for my own mother. And I knew I had a winner there. And a lot of people and our caregivers, that's what they come. And they see themselves, and our caregivers get very close with our clients because they become a part of their family. And I've had families call me, and we do, as all businesses, we do, quality assurance checks. Either we go out to the home to visit with a family, or we'll give a daughter or son a phone call. How's it going? What can we do? And time and time again, we say, hey, Betty's becoming part of our family, or Susan's becoming part of our family. We couldn't do it without her. And so for the caregivers, I mean, they get more from this than just a paycheck. They get, when they leave their client for that day, they get the satisfaction knowing they made a difference in someone's life.
Wow. And
that's something you can't put a price on,
No, that's that intangible benefit. And so what you've done is you've taken the experience question to a whole new level. It's not, have you done this? Have you given care to a senior adult for pay, money?
Right.
But what is an intangible paycheck that you derived from this experience? And so caring for a mom, caring for an aunt, somebody like that. And sounds like your compassion, you look for people with compassion and heart. And that's a soft skill, but to become a member of somebody else's family, to get adopted into somebody else's family, that's a gift from God.
Yeah. We even had an experience, Joey, where last year we had a client, we were probably with her 3 to 4 years. He actually lived in a facility, but we were there with her, and we were providing around-the-clock care. And at her funeral, the family asked her caregivers and me to sit with the family.
Wow.
That's just how powerful an impact that our caregivers had on their family's life, that they included us at her funeral to sit with the family, because they said, you guys are family to us because you cared for our mom. So
wow, that is significant, Dan.
That was very powerful for me. That
absolutely.
That, again, it's not just a job. Of course, it is a job for them because they've got to get up and
sure.
Some start. I'm sure on Monday mornings they don't want to go in at 7 o'clock. They'd rather. But it's also a ministry, and I think not only for me as the owner, but for our caregivers, that's their ministry. That's what they do. Now, and again, as I said earlier, my work is my worship. Their work is their worship as well.
Yeah. Well, there are really 3 levels that you're talking about here. There's job, where you force yourself to get out of bed and be there Monday morning at 7 o'clock, right? Because you got to pay the bills. Then there's career. I've done this long enough to kind of climb the ladder and what have you. Right. And then there's calling. And that's what I hear you talking about, Van, is that this is a calling on your life from your own personal experience as an only son, but also as a pastor for 23 years. So you were in these situations. So I really hear the story of God preparing you to own this franchise of Home Instead in Mount Airy, and to seek out those people who are also called. And that just makes all the difference in the world. I mean, you can find people to fill a job, right? You can find some folks who see it as a career, but calling,
right?
That's a whole nother level of manifestation of God's grace at work. And so that's when your work becomes worship.
Yeah. And I think that whole idea, you were talking about calling earlier, I go back to when I was making this transition, a career transition from being a pastor to being a business owner. And it wasn't a decision that I made lightly. I mean, it really probably was a decision I took at least a year or more to really consider. And I know that in that year I sought out counsel from friends of mine who I could go and in confidence,
Right.
people in my denomination who I trusted their counsel. And I got some wonderful advice. And one person I talked to told me, he said, because I said, well, but the question I always ask, well, God called you in the church. Can he call you out of the church? And one person said, well, Van, he said, our call is fluid. It's God, God is always, in the Bible, God's spirit is described as the wind. The wind's always blowing, and the kingdom are always changing. And so, yes, he could be calling you something else. And one person who I think about a lot said, he said, Van, maybe God's calling you to another ministry. Don't look at it as calling you out of the church. He's calling you to another form of ministry. And I truly believe that's what this is. This is a form of ministry. So it was that good counsel. Again, going back to your point about the calling, that I do feel that this is a calling to do this.
Yeah.
And business is. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we talk and write about this as there are seasons to calling. And so for you, 23 years was a season, maybe an extended season, right? Because it's 23 years of calling to pastor a church. And now God has moved your calling into caregiving for senior adults.
Yeah. And it's funny because I look back and I remember when I was a pastor, and I would, and I had people in my churches that were, business owners and started their own business, and I would say, and I would think about those folks, and I was like, wow, I could never do that. You start this business and you put up, a good portion of your life savings, and what if it doesn't work? And now I here I am, 7 years later, and I think, well, that's what I've done. I don't know if, but I think even in those times, who knows that God was preparing me for this.
Yeah. God certainly has a wonderful sense of humor, right?
Just entertaining the whole idea that that you could start a business. I mean, again, and the funny thing is I admired people who would start their own business, and so now here I am.
Yeah. Van Lankford is the franchise owner of Home Instead in Mount Airy, North Carolina. Snickers, who is the silent partner, is taking a nap in
He's taking a nap in my lap right now.
Yeah, right. Snickers, we appreciate your presence here today. But Van, this question is for you. Faith Positive Nation always wants to know from our guest about a favorite Bible verse or Bible passage, one that encourages you, speaks to you as a business owner. Have you got one? And I know you're a pastor, so this may be a very hard question for you to answer.
Oh, well, this business, again, Joy, for me has been a faith journey, and it definitely has been, and I think part of that is some of my own anxiety, because I was trained to be a pastor. I went through. I had good educational experiences both in college and in seminary. I felt prepared when I came out that I knew kind of what to do. And then until you get that on-the-job training, which is sometimes different from what they said in the seminary. But I felt after doing it for 23 years, I kind of knew how to do it. And so some of my and so now here I am in business.
Right.
I don't have a business degree, and I don't. I didn't go to school for this, and so it's been a great learning experience, and it's been a faith journey. And but you ask about one passage that's really kind of easy for me, because when I began this faith journey, I was a pastor, and I was in my study one morning. I was doing my morning devotions. I would usually, when I first got there in the morning, read the Bible, and I was reading one of these. They make the Bibles where you read through the Bible in 1 year.
Right.
And so you read, some of Old Testament,
so many passages, right?
Some Psalms and New Testament. And actually, I'd gotten a little behind. And so I gave myself grace to say, well, I'll do it in 2 years. But I always remember I was in my office one day, and I was reading the scriptures, and in my spirit, I felt like that I was ready to make this transition, and but didn't know what it was going to look like and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I read a passage out of Jeremiah 29:11. And it said, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope. And when I read those words, it was almost as if God verbally spoke to me. Wow. I mean, really, in my spirit, it was as if God said, that's my plan for you. Even though I was uncertain about the future, even though I was having some anxiety about making this transition, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope. And that really was a turning point for me. And that's really through my business has been the verse, and I've shared that with our office staff. And as a matter of fact, if you come in our office right now, I can point to 2 or 3 places where that verse is in our office. It's as you come in the door, there's a beautiful plaque that actually the owner in North Wilkesboro, who's become a good friend of mine, who took care of my dad. He and his wife on the first anniversary of having our office open gave us a beautiful plaque with that verse on it.
Wow!
A few years ago for Christmas, one of my office staff gave me a poster which hangs in my office with that verse on it. So that has really been a very important verse for me, because that God, God knows the future, and sometimes you have to, well, not sometimes, all the time, you've got to trust Him for the future.
Yeah.
And that goes back to how you ask how faith guides our business. Is early on in business, we were attending a church that actually gave us a copy of a little devotional book. I hope you've read it, called Jesus Calling. And
yeah, I read it every morning.
Well, and I do too. And this book has meant so much to me. Sarah Young is such a wonderful author, and in that book, much like Jesus would be speaking to you. And one of the things that one of her constant themes in that book is thankfulness and trust. Thankfulness and trust. And early on, when I was starting the business, I know a lot of your listeners who are business people know about making cold calls and about trying to build your business through networking and things like that. And I remember in those early days, those early years when I was out in my little Toyota Corolla, making those calls and everything. And trying to get that first client, trying to get that second client, trying to build your business. That had such an impression on me that I wrote on I think I got it here somewhere, the back of a little the back of a note, a card that was got the cardboard, the note.
Oh yeah, you used all the pieces of paper then.
I used all the paper, so I only had one thing. So I wrote those words. I mean, you see it, thankfulness and trust.
Wow. Thankfulness
and trust, and I kept that in the seat of my car. Through all those cold calls, through all those networking opportunities, and I would look at it several times through the day, and I would be, first of all, thankful that God had placed me where I was, whether I had 0 clients or 2 clients or 5 clients. I was thankful for each of those clients, and I was going to trust God that He would lead in this business. So that verse and the words from Jesus Calling, and that constant reminder of being thankful for what you have, but yet trusting God for the future, has been the thing that's really led me in the business.
Wow, we are not in business alone, are we? We can have faith in our work because God is with us always. Van, your story today has been such an encouragement to me, and I know an encouragement to a lot of other people in Faith Positive Nation. What's the best way for somebody in Faith Positive Nation to reach out to you that wants to hear more about your story?
Well, they can email me. It's just Van Lankford, VanLankford @homeinstead.com.
Okay.
You can, my office number is 336-789-4472.
That's great. Thank you. That email and phone number is essential to us. And if you're listening to this on iTunes on a treadmill, it's in the episode copy. Okay. You'll get to see it there. And if it's not, just email us and we'll give you Van's email address. Van, thank you so much. Van Lankford is the franchise owner of Home Instead, giving care in the name of Jesus and just sharing the love of God with senior adults in Mount Airy, North Carolina. Van, we pray God's blessings on you and Snickers. We pray God's blessings on you as well. Obviously, you're a blessed dog, and you're a good doggy too. So we appreciate you letting Van do all the talking during this interview today, Snickers.
Thank you. Snickers goes to the office with us every day. He's very much part of the business, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So we just pray God's blessings on everything that you do, Van. Thank you for your ministry in Mount Airy.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Faith Positive Radio, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Suggest guests and ask questions when you email Dr. Joey at info@getpositive.today. And be sure to get your free gift of the 5 positive business conversations to have today coaching program at getpositive.today. Until next time, may God bless you with everything your heart can hope for and more than your mind can imagine.